If you're looking in the Pew Bible, it's on page 81 in the New Testament section of the Bible. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. May the Lord bless this reading and our sharing and thinking about this passage of Scripture. I always like this parable. It's one of two parables that's in this chapter. The chapter has a hodgepodge of kinds of things. It has some healings. It has two parables. It has his encounters. Jesus and the rich young ruler is often called. And this parable, though, has always been a favorite of mine. I think that it's because I've always seen myself as being a very humble person, and I've always been very proud of that. And I think that it's really easy for me to, or maybe all others of us, to see ourselves identify with the tax collector who comes in, rather than who confesses sin before God and throws himself sort of on the mercy of God, rather than the Pharisee who calls attention to himself and highlights the religious things that he has done. In today's gospel, we are really not sure who comprised the whole audience, who was there when Jesus told the story. Was it his disciples, and he saw in his disciples this pharisaical attitude and this lack of understanding of the need that all of us have for God's grace, the need that we all have for God to reconcile? Were there others standing around? Were there Pharisee-like people, leaders in the religious community, that were standing around, and Jesus felt like he needed to tell this story? We are also, I'm not really sure why Luke recorded this. To whom, what was going on around Luke? Was it just that he was saying, oh yeah, there was another story that Jesus told, this other parable, I want to be sure to get this one in? Or was there a situation in that early church and Luke felt that he needed to include these words of Jesus, this story from Jesus? We don't have any indication. We don't know. He used the two characters to make his point. One, a Pharisee, a pillar of the religious community. The other, a tax collector, a hated, often corrupt agent of the Roman government who made his living by taxing his countrymen and often cheating them. It could be that in choosing these two characters, that Jesus was aware that there was a shock value there. You know, to use the most elevated and the lowest as the characters for the story. All of the people probably knew that there knew people who fit somewhere in between, but these were caricatures, and so they were the extreme. I think when that occurs, then it's easier for me anyway to sort of say, well, is it I, Lord? Which one of these am I? You know, the parable is about pride and humility. It's about phoniness and authenticity. It's about hypocrisy, pretense, and transparency. It is about remaining in control. It's about trusting God. It's about propping oneself up with religious appearance. And it's about coming as you are, and standing spiritually, unclothed spiritually before God. The one man, the Pharisee, stood prideful and showed disdain for those around him, especially the tax collector. I don't know why I keep pointing the orange here. Maybe I'll use on that. He was a religious person. He fasted twice a week, followed the ritualistic rules of his faith tradition. In the parable, he wore his piety like a bright new robe. He declared his righteousness to all who stood within hearing. And he graded himself, probably on the curb, and graded those around him with much more severity. The other man expressed the cares of his heart, the brokenness that he brought to God. He knew he was undone. He sensed that he needed fixing in a way that only God could fix. The parable is about pride and humility. Pride, according to the ancients, is the root of all sinfulness. I was reading a book I'm reading about, or a collection of writings by Dorothy Sayers, who was an Oxford scholar and a friend of C.S. Lewis. And she wrote a number of books and plays, and she had a mystery series also that she wrote. In one of her addresses, she said, but the head and origin of all sin is the basic sin of superbia, of pride. In one way, there is so much to say about pride that one might speak of it for a week and not have done. Yet in another way, all there is to be said about it can be said in a single sentence. It is the sin of trying to be as God. There's a lot that we can say about pride. I was thinking, that pride is like cholesterol. There's good pride and bad pride. Good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Some of us are more aware of that than others. If pride is simple, honest self-esteem, and even self-esteem that we sort of gain, because for me, there was there's this constant struggle to sort of see myself as okay. If pride is that, then that can be helpful. If pride is appreciation for the community that you're a part of, for the team that you root for, we talk about school pride, we talk about family pride, we talk about black pride, we talk about, we use those terms in ways that, and those can be positive terms. But if pride is that which we use to prop ourselves up with, to justify our lives before God, if pride is an arrogance, then it fakes us out and makes us think that we are more than we are and have to be more than we can be, and pride becomes a destructive thing. And today, in today's world, there are many people who describe themselves as spiritual, but not religious. Probably some of you, you feel more, that sort of draws you, maybe that phrase, spiritual and not affiliated. And some of us may see ourselves as that way, and I think that some of Jesus' concern was for people who were religious but not spiritual. When I read the teachings of Jesus, I see one who is constantly challenging his generation and generations through the ages to get real, to be authentic in worship. On Friday, I was pondering the gospel for the fifth or sixth time over this week. And I was looking, and while I was looking at some things on the computer, suddenly there was a news flash, and it was a CNN website news, and it was a live viewing of Congressman Elijah Cummings' funeral. Did any of you see all of that, or did you see it all? Yeah. He was born the third child of 6 to sharecropper parents who moved from the fields of North Carolina to find work and a better life in Baltimore. Growing up in inner city Baltimore, Elijah and I probably moved back and forth calling him Elijah and calling him Congressman Cummings, because that's what they did in his funeral. Almost everyone who knew him called him by his first name. And many who did not know him, but they felt this kind of intimacy with him. Growing up in the inner city of Baltimore, Elijah graduated from Howard University, got a law degree at the University of Maryland, practiced law in Baltimore for 19 years, then served in the Maryland House of Delegates for 14 years. In 1996, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 25 years until his death on October 17. I've been an admirer of Congressman Cummings, especially during this time of division. It seems that even with the pressures of the power pressures that are pulling us apart, he continued to try to work across the aisles, and gave respect to the people, even the people that disagreed with him. He was known as the people's representative. His credentials are quite impressive. He brought civility to politics and made himself available to people. He was often seen by his constituents in the grocery store pushing his own cart, buying groceries. Friday, in watching the eulogies, I really started a little late. I missed Secretary Clinton's comments and some of the early ones. But I heard his comments by a member of his staff, his wife, Presidents Clinton and Obama, and his pastor. What I kept hearing about Congressman Cummings, Elijah, was humility. So I decided I would share with you my notes from two of the speakers of the funeral. If you're taking notes, this is where you can find it. Harry Spikes, one of Congressman Cummings' staff members, recounted Elijah's words of wisdom. Elijah told him that in 5 minutes he could teach him everything that he had learned in 25 years. So today I want to share you what his keys to success are. First of all, be compassionate and kind. Later in his eulogy, President Obama underlined Elijah's kindness to people, powerless people as well as people with power. President Obama pointed out that kindness is not synonymous with weakness, but with strength. Second tip that Elijah gave to Harry Spikes was be third key to success is value friendship. Always check on your friends. Sometimes I find myself being so in the moment, and I forget that there are friends that need to be checked on. I had a friend named Greg Jones in Starkville, Mississippi, and almost every week I could count on a call from Greg. He preached revivals all over the country. He was an African-American pastor, preached revivals all over the country. And I would get these calls from Greg, his deep voice. He would say, "Again," and I realized that I really did love to hear from Greg. At his funeral, I was one of many who were asked to do a eulogy. This was in their tradition. His tradition. They had two services, and so at one of them, I shared how much Greg meant to me. We went to ball games together. We went on trips together, and we ate meals together. And for years, since my moving from Mississippi, he had been calling me. The guy that followed me got up there and said, Greg's been unfaithful to me. Because all of us thought that Greg was our best friend. Another guy who also Anglo white, he said, he got up after me and he said, "I thought I was going to get up here and say, I was Greg's best white friend." It was after I had shared. He said, "Well, I guess I could say that maybe I was Greg's best white friend named Johnny, who used to be a missionary to China," because it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful value to have. Always check on your friends. The fourth key is pass the ball. A true leader shares the ball. A true leader does not have to score all at once. A true leader is excited to see someone else take the lead. A true leader steps up and leads when necessary, but also encourages others to lead and to find themselves and find the spotlight if there is one to be found. The fifth thing is work through your pain, and they talk a lot about how Elijah worked up until his death almost. So he was actually working through his physical pain. But there are a lot of kinds of pain, aren't there? Some of the pains that we have are there, and there is a place for sacrifice. As Harry finished, I thought, I like these goals, but they seem hard. I know these goals were recognized in Elijah's life, but how did he develop and maintain these goals? A little bit later in the funeral, Elijah's pastor shared, and he used the format is, he shared why Elijah came to church. And that's when I realized that Elijah Cummings was the perfect modern example of Luke 18:9-14. In his exuberant African-American preaching style, Bishop Walter S. Thompson Sr. told us that why Elijah came to church. First, every week he brought his brokenness to God. Every week, Elijah realized his failures and the ways that he had missed the mark, his sins, his scars, and his scars from them. He, like the tax collector of the parable, brought his need for God's forgiveness to God. Second reason he came to church is he came to get in church, God restored that ground and reminded him of his values and his faith. Third, he came to church to get strength for the challenges of the week. He knew that he needed strength beyond himself in order to meet the challenges of the week. In church, he was restored by worship, which included the presence of others and all of the different ways that worship is done. Elijah was able to fight the battles that he fought because he came to church. Bishop Thompson said that Elijah and his wife Maya would come in, and they would come down and they would sit in the same place, and they'd sit in the same place every Sunday without fanfare. He didn't come in waving to the congregation. He would just slip in and sit in the pew. And there he would worship. Yesterday, I got an email from Bobby Horstig, and I know that she would be not mind my sharing. Every time I've asked her, do you mind if I share your concern with the congregation? She always said, sure. I had just written an email asking her how things are going. She said, Bob and I are okay for now. But most of you know that Bob is having a very serious operation on the first Monday in November. But anyway, she wrote, Bob and I are okay for now, and I know you are just a shout away if we need you. We are going to make the best of the week coming up and get ready for our journey ahead. We won't be at church tomorrow. We're afraid of getting too close to people because we can't afford to get sick. So we're going to stay close to home this week as much as possible. Plus, Bob gets tired quickly now. I'm sorry we will miss the congregational meeting and your sermon. I hope you and Helen had a nice time. Will have a nice time in New York. Blessings to you also, Bobby. I wrote her back and I said, I think you're wise to avoid public places as you approach the operation. I will plan to see you once you get checked into the hospital a week from tomorrow. We will get back from Rochester Wednesday, so if you need to see me before next Saturday, let me know. Do you have a set time to check into the hospital? I always sterilize my hands before entering a room, and I can even wear a mask if needed. Then I thought she was asking about the sermon, so I told her. I said, tomorrow's sermon is about the two men who went into the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee boasted to God of his goodness and looked with disdain on the tax collector. The tax collector just acknowledged his sinfulness and asked for forgiveness. I think it's a parable challenging the pride that leads to religious and false piety. I think that what Jesus was saying to the listeners was to get real, be authentic. Don't prop yourself up with religious pretentiousness. In transparency with God, salvation is found. Regardless of how or when we enter our weekly times together, whether we are bruised from the week, distracted by the challenges in our lives, zoned out from fatigue, how will we come to this time? If we may become elated of the conquest and successes of the week, the call of God is to take off the fancy robes that hide our frailty, that admit our need for a God who knows us and loves us anyway. The call is always for us to be authentic, transparent, and bold.